Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Please take a minute to drop your name and where you're from in the chat so we know who's in the room with us. We're going to get started here in about 1 minute. Hey, Billy. Oh my gosh. So good to see some familiar names. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for another one of our Beyond School Hours follow-up webinars. My name is Elizabeth Seary. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Development at Foundations, Inc. And before we get started, I'll just give you a little bit of background about Foundations, Inc. We are a national education nonprofit. We're located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And our mission is to improve the quality of education by strengthening the skills of educators. So we work across the school day. We work in after-school programs with schools, districts, and even at the state level. And our vision is really to create a brighter future for every child every day. If you're interested in learning more about Foundations, you can take a minute to follow us on social media or check out our website, and Paula will make sure that that information is in the chat for you. You might already know us from our signature professional learning experience, which is the Beyond School Hours Conference. The conference is held every February. In February 2023, we're going to be back in Orlando, Florida from the 9th to the 12th. So that's February 9th to February 12th. And we are hoping that you will all join us. Our registration is open, so check out that website as well. And we hope that you will come see us in February. Today, we are very lucky to have with us Laura Fenn, who is Creator and Director of Strategic Partnerships for Walking Classrooms. Laura's going to share some information about the innovative award-winning educational program and how you can implement it in your programs as well. So thanks, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to all of you for being here. I love that we have from Alaska down to Florida and everywhere in between. So I know that this is an incredibly busy time of year for you. And the fact that you are willing to spend some of your time with me is such an honor. And I hope that this is worth your while. If you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to, just break through and ask a question. Or if you're more comfortable putting it in the chat, that's fine too. I'll try to get to those questions as they pop up, or I can look at the chat at the end. So I'll go ahead and get started. So by the end, we'll talk a little bit about the research behind the program, the content, the structure of the walking classroom, some resources that we have available to supplement the program, some ideas for hybrid and at-home learning if your schools and districts are still doing some of that, and then the opportunity for question and answer. That's me, latchkey kid of the 1970s, growing up unattended for hours on end, made myself some boxed macaroni and cheese for dinner. And I turned out okay. But, I remember I loved school because we had recess 3 times a day. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And we had recess first thing in the morning, we had recess at lunchtime, and then we had an afternoon recess break. And only recently did I realize that we had all of those breaks because the teachers were out back having a cigarette. And we certainly don't want that anymore. But if we did have recess 3 times a day, wouldn't that be wonderful? But I do think that that was part of the reason why I loved school so much, is because it was fun and we had stuff to look forward to, and we got a chance to blow off some steam and build, playground relationships. And so I loved school so much that I became a teacher. And when I was a teacher, although we didn't get 3 recess breaks a day, what I did try to do is play kickball with my students every Friday. And so I taught in lots of different environments. I taught in East Harlem. I taught in some swanky, suburban areas. I taught in rural North Carolina areas. And regardless of, the student population, everybody loves kickball. And so the deal was, if my students finished all of their work by Friday, we would spend the afternoon on the playground playing kickball. And wouldn't you know it, these kids always finished everything they had to do by Friday afternoon so we could play kickball. And it was great. And so, it just gave everybody a chance to blow off some steam, to have something to look forward to, and really just a chance to build community. It was fun until it wasn't. And, these last, 15 years, the squeeze has really been put on teachers for classroom instruction. And so I was told that I couldn't have my Friday kickball games anymore because I needed that time for classroom instruction. And so it was really just such a bummer because the kids' PE and recess were being cut or eliminated. And then we weren't able to go outside anymore. And there just was not, like, the joy was being sucked out of the classroom. And I would try to do the dog and pony show as much as I could and make, my class time as entertaining as possible. But, it's sitting even now for this hour-long webinar, you're like, imagine these poor kids, 6 hours a day, 180 days a year. So anyway, it got so bad that, the state throws all these mandates at you, right? And so one of the mandates was that, you needed to have 120 minutes of physical activity every week. Well, layered on top of everything else that we had to do, a certain number of minutes for, curriculum instruction, certain number of minutes for XYZ, there just wasn't enough time for this physical activity. So what the district started to do was count the minutes from sitting in the classroom to going down to the lunchroom, from sitting in the classroom, going down to the buses, from sitting in the classroom to going, to the library. They started counting that as physical activity. And it was just, it was just such a drag. So, and your heart breaks for these kids, right? Like it's not normal or healthy for kids to be sitting all day. So one day I had a terrible, terrible day. I was super, super grumpy. And I came home and I didn't want to talk to my own kids. I didn't want to talk to my husband. I didn't want to talk to my dog. I didn't want to do anything. I just, wanted to get out. And so I'm not like a gym rat. I'm not one of those people who goes to the gym to blow off steam. And so I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I went for a walk. And while I was walking, I always laugh at myself because I wasn't listening to angry rap music or violent heavy metal or anything like, I was listening to a podcast that I had downloaded, whether or not Betsy Ross had created the first American flag. And so, I'm walking and I'm trying to stay angry, but I'm learning something. And my mood is improving. I'm getting some fresh air and exercise. I'm waving to neighbors. And all of a sudden I'm feeling better and I'm learning something. And as educators, you never turn that off, right? You're always looking for ways to engage your students. You're always looking for ways to make learning fun. And so I was like, my kids could do that. So I came home and I started looking for more educational podcasts that would be appropriate for my fifth graders. And there's a lot of educational podcasts out there, but not many are geared toward kids. The ones that are geared toward kids are sort of junk. Are often junk, not always. I don't want to, but there was nothing that really tied to the curriculum. There was nothing that really sort of fit with what I knew my limitations were. So I started recording some of my own lessons. So I looked at my, lesson plan for the next couple of weeks, and I started to record lessons about the Revolutionary War. I started to record lessons about, some science topics that we were going to cover. I started to record lessons about whatever. I just sort of made it up. And then I went to Walmart or, Target, I don't even remember. And I got these really cheap MP3 players that I could load with this playlist of podcasts that I had created. So I approached my principal and I said, hey, I know that I'm not allowed to go outside, but I've come up with this way where, it's still me teaching, but I'm going to have my kids listen to these lessons, these audio lessons, and we're going to listen to them while we're outside. And we're going to be walking outside, but it's still me teaching. It's still class time. And I'm trying to justify this whole thing. And my principal, she looked at me and she said, you know what, Laura? I just announced my retirement. I don't care what you do. And I was so grateful only because she no longer had to worry about her position, did that give me the freedom to try this program with my students. And so, as you might imagine, they loved it, right? I was so excited just to be able to get them outside. I didn't think they would remember anything. I didn't think that they would, it would be this sort of like transformative educational experience. I just thought they'd be happy to be outside. They would appreciate the break. When they got back to class, they'd be in a better mood. Well, they got back to class, and I promise you, it was so wonderful because my students with dyslexia, my students with autism, my students with ADHD, my students who were poor readers for whatever reason, all of a sudden, they were the ones who were participating in the class discussions. They were the ones who remembered the most from the podcast. They were the ones who were initiating discussions. My smart kids, they were like, they would try to participate, but this wasn't their preferred learning style, right? So they were not the ones who were shining. It was these kids who had always been on the outside, these kids who had always been on the periphery, who were now realizing, wow, I am smart, and wow, I can contribute to class discussions. And it was just really, really powerful. I was so surprised that learning went from this to this. And the kids, they just loved it. They became like dogs. And so, like first thing they'd come in the morning, are we going to go for a walk today? Are we going to go for a walk today? And the thing is, they thought they were getting out of something. They thought that they were getting out of doing work. But in truth, they actually were gaining so much more than I could have even anticipated. So this is an illustration from Dr. Chuck Hillman. At the time, he was at University of Illinois. I think he's moved on from there since then. But it just shows after a 20-minute walk, just walking, how much the brain lights up and how primed it is for learning. So one of the expressions I used to say to my students when I was teaching is, if the bum is numb, the brain is the same. And so if you're sitting around all day, your blood is soggy and your brain is soggy and your body is soggy and everything is soggy. But if you're up and if you move around just for 20 minutes, it gets that blood flowing, it oxygenates the brain, and it really does prime it for learning. I didn't know any of this stuff when I started the program. It just seemed like a good idea and sort of a sneaky way to get my kids out of the classroom. But I promise you, it has turned into this wonderful, wonderful program. We've been around now for 12 years. And teachers tell me the same thing over and over and over again about how much it really does impact students' learning, how much joy it brings into the classroom, and how it engages different learners. We had the good fortune to work with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill a few years ago. And it really, working with them, they did the program evaluation, and it just really validated what teachers had been telling us for years, is that, the impact on learning when kids were up, when they had their gross, muscles moving, that it really did improve learning and retention, both short-term and long-term, as well as the mood. So, the kids' moods, they have something to look forward to. They're not sitting all day. They're kids. They're up and they're moving. They need to be moving, and it makes them happy. And so not only do they learn while they're walking, but then they do get back to class. They're primed for more learning, and they're happier about it. Again, I touched a little bit on just how walking while listening to educational podcasts really does help tap into different learning styles and really help narrow that achievement gap. So whether your student is a visual or an auditory or kinesthetic or a traditional reader writer, walking while listening really does sort of access different learning styles that students might not have known that they had. And, they might not have known that that is the way that they need to access information for success. We also, it's just a really interesting concept, right? When kids get to middle school, their physical activity drops off precipitously, and especially girls once they start menstruating. And, myself, I hated gym class. My daughter, she hated gym class. Like the idea, especially in middle school, the idea of like doing the crab walk across the gym in front of, 25 of your classmates, horrifying. I'm 6 feet tall. I've never played a game of basketball in my life. The idea of trying to like dribble basketball, see, I'm dribbling with two hands, dribble and then like shoot a layup in front of the disaster. Like nothing would be more mortifying. But with walking, it's a really approachable exercise, right? There's small risk of failure. And so even if a child is really out of shape, it's just walking and they can build up that speed. They can build up that endurance. And, I have teachers there's one teacher in particular in California. She's outside of Los Angeles, and she has 35 kids in her class, and she's the gym teacher. She's the art teacher. She's the music teacher. She's the everything. She does not get a break during the day. And so, they do the walking classroom regularly because that, not only does it help academically, but it adds, to the physical education component. And she said that never in her teaching experience had she had students who could complete the mile run. It's, required by the state. And so she said her first year after she started doing the walking classroom, it was the very first year that all of her students were able to complete the mile. They didn't all run it, but they were all able to complete it. And she said, just establishing those healthy lifestyle habits while learning, she said, was just fantastic. So really, really, a lot of good things happening. When the University of North Carolina did the quantitative evaluation, they also did a qualitative evaluation, and they asked the students how they felt while they were doing the walking classroom, and they felt smart and excited and happy and healthy and strong and relaxed and all of these wonderful things. Teachers also reported higher attendance on walking classroom days. So if the teacher posts the schedule of what's going to happen that week, if the walking classroom is going to be 2 or 3 or 4 times that week, the students are much more likely to be on time, and certainly much more likely to even be in attendance at all. And they would tell the teacher that they came because it was a walking classroom day. So kids come to school so they can get out and have some fun. Crazy. So this is what the kids are like after they walk. They're like, woohoo, this is great. And then they come back to class and they're perfect little angels and they get all their work done. Not always, but we could hope. So this is what the program looks like in action. All of the students listen to the same podcast at the same time. So the program is used in regular classroom time. It's used in after-school programs. It's used in summer camps. We've got boys and girls clubs that use it. We've got YMCAs. We've got, lots and lots of different, it's a very flexible program. But the basic idea is that if a teacher, let's say, is teaching a social studies unit on the Revolutionary War, she would say, okay, kids, cue it up to number, 27. Today, we're going to listen to a podcast about the Boston Tea Party. And so the kids all, cue it up to number 27 and they press start and they all listen to the same thing at the same time. So that's a picture of the program in action. The devices, the audio devices, they're manufactured by Playaway. You might be familiar with them. They do a lot of like books on tape, the books that come preloaded on here. So there's no uploading or downloading. There's no Wi-Fi needed. The only thing kids can do with these is listen to educational podcasts. So, there's no texting, no music, no nothing. But it's interesting enough. It's a device, the kids are excited about it. These are infinitely shareable. So while walking, each child does need their own audio device. But then when they're done, that whole set of audio devices can be shared with another classroom and then shared with another classroom and then reused year after year after year. Kids, for the cootie factor, do need their own earbuds, but it's just a standard earbud jack. You can get really inexpensive earbuds at the dollar store. Here is a quick video of the program in action.
It all starts with a few simple steps. An MP3 player with a social studies lesson via podcast, and you've got the walking classroom.
It's been really fun because we get to get out of the classroom and learn stuff that we haven't really learned.
With budgets being cut, very often students only get PE, once, maybe twice a week.
And so former teacher Laura Finn knew there was something more that could be done. Why not combine what students learn in the classroom with exercise?
You walk, but instead of sitting in a classroom, your brain gets more air and it helps you learn.
When we're inside the classroom, we have to sit there all day and do work. But when we go outside, we have fresh air and have energy to play.
Just to give you an idea of how successful this program is, researchers at Elon University started tracking the students' test scores before and after they started the program. In just 10 weeks, their scores shot up.
My kids have seen really good test scores. Yeah. Social studies in particular, they've done really well because they listen to me, but they don't always listen to me the best. And when they get to hear it from another perspective.
By getting the students walking every day during school, we're trying to get them to establish healthy lifestyle habits early that they can carry forward with them as they grow older.
Good job. Good job.
In Alamance County.
So I always laugh at that last scene because the two teachers are on the side and they're sort of like cheering on the students. We absolutely encourage teachers to walk with their students, but that the news crew came out to that school in North Carolina, and it was about 5,000 degrees. So the teachers didn't want to be hot and sweaty for the cameras, and so they decided that they were just going to wave from the sidelines. But we certainly do encourage teachers to get out and walk with the kids. Teachers need some fresh air and exercise as well. It gives them a break, gives them a chance to press the reset button. To that point, it doesn't, you don't need nice weather. We've got lots of students in Alaska that use the program. We've got lots of students in Florida that use the program. And so on days when it's like super, super cold or super, super hot or raining or whatever, they just do an interior route around the inside of the school. So you're not limited to, good weather locations to do the program. What do the kids listen to while they walk? Well, we've got lots and lots and lots of podcasts to choose from. They're on this audio device. It's an entire school year's worth of content. So like I mentioned, there are science podcasts, social studies, language arts, biographies, parts of speech. There's a lot to choose from. So this one, for example, podcast number 140 is physical versus political maps. Each podcast begins with a health literacy message. This one is personal space. And then there's also some social emotional learning character values woven in. And in this case, it's reliability. So all of the podcasts follow a similar format. So usually it's two students and their teacher who are out for a walk. And as they're walking, they just happen to be talking about some sort of educational topic, so that the kids who are walking, it's sort of like they're eavesdropping on that conversation. So they're not being talked at. So it's not like the ocean floor is a place where many has been unexplored, for blah, 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 blah. So it's a conversation. It's real students. It's former students of mine. So, it's sort of very engaging to the kids because it's kid voices and conversation, couple corny jokes thrown in. So it's very, very approachable. So like I said, for example, this one, physical versus political maps, starts with a health literacy message. So I don't know exactly what the script is, but walking. One of the kids might say like, dude, back up, you're in my space. And then the other kid's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was walking so close. And then the teacher pops in and she talks about how, the idea of personal space is very important. And, some people are very comfortable being close. Other people are like, hey, 6 feet barrier. Especially relevant now. So then they talk about that, the idea of personal space and how, people have it, but then also certainly among different cultures and different countries around the world, the idea of personal space varies. Okay, blah, 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 pivot. Speaking of personal space, or speaking of space, remember last week when we were talking about physical versus political maps, blah, 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 blah. And then the conversation switches to this content, this core content of physical versus political maps. And again, it's very kid-friendly. There's questions, there's review, and it's all within a conversation. So then that lasts about 15 minutes. So the basic format of the podcast is that the health literacy message is in the beginning, the main content, and then the summary. And then, like I said, the social emotional learning is woven throughout the podcasts. We do have extensive lesson plans that support the podcast. So I realize that this is very small. I apologize for that. So there's always going to be some highlighted vocabulary that might, that the kids might not be familiar with that you might want to review. And then there's always going to be some questions for thought and discussion. So the first two questions are always going to be content related. They're always going to talk about the big ideas of the podcast. So in this one, talking about hot springs and geysers, what were some of the big ideas? And then, what specific conditions are needed to create hot springs or geysers? And then there's a third question for each podcast, the third discussion question, and that's going to focus on social emotional learning. There's always a connection, like using the content as a springboard. In this one, hot springs are gradual and peaceful, and geysers are dramatic and forceful. Okay, they're both very different. They're very beautiful. And then it compares that to communication styles. So what's the benefit of approaching things with patience and taking your time? What's the benefit of approaching things boldly and confidently? And so, again, depending on the comfort level that students have talking about their experience, they can say, well, when I did this, this was the result. It can be led by the teacher of, knowing how and when to sort of moderate your communication styles. And then for, kids who might not necessarily be so comfortable sharing just yet, they can talk more about the value of a hot spring or a geyser when you really know they're talking about the value of different communication styles. But regardless, it's an easy springboard to lead into deeper discussion. And every podcast has that. So there's lessons about, reliability, but then also honesty, respect, fortitude, and perseverance, and just lots and lots of different ideas that if the walking classroom is used throughout the year, not only do they have those health literacy messages at the beginning, so as they're walking, they're building their health literacy, they're getting stronger just by walking, but they're also building that health literacy background. So in this case, they have more information about toxins. So, excuse me, for the let me back up a little bit. Sorry, I got off track a little bit. There's also a comprehension quiz for each podcast. And the first 8 questions are always going to be about the podcast, and those go from basic recall down to higher level thinking skills. So following Bloom's taxonomy, so you've got your basic recall, and then it goes into, deeper level thinking skills like sequencing and inferencing. And then when you get to the last 2 questions, those are always going to reinforce the health literacy messages. So in this case, for hot springs and geysers, it's about toxins. The health literacy message for the other one, the maps, was physical space. And so again, just building that health literacy so that the kids, it provides them this lifelong tool that they're able to make healthy choices going forward. And because it's presented in a non-threatening, kid-friendly way, it's not heavy-handed. It just gives the kids the tools to make these healthy decisions themselves. Again, the program can be used in lots of different scenarios. We really do recommend that it not be used during PE or recess. The last thing we want to do is sort of take away that time for physical activity and replace it with more learning, or at least that's how the kids are going to see it. However, if you take class time and you replace it with the walking classroom, they think they're getting out of something, and they're getting so much more, right? So they're getting, just the physical activity, but the content as well, which will serve them short-term and long-term. But it can be used in traditional school settings, out of school settings, summer programs. A lot of programs do it with like Girls on the Run, or, their after school program shares it with their regular teachers during the school day. It's a very, very flexible program. We have lots and lots of supplemental activities on our adopter resource page. So if you do become an adopter of the walking classroom, you'll get the secret squirrel code, and you will have access to the teacher resources. And there are a ton of created and curated resources that help support the walking classroom. Excuse me. For each podcast, you can search by different themes. You can search by keyword. And then for each podcast, there is going to be, we have a slide deck that supports it. There's also some related videos. There's also printables and worksheets, for more traditional learning. And again, all of these things have been reviewed and researched by us. So they're high quality support materials, really, trying to save you teachers as much time as possible. And if I could find my cursor, there we go. That would save me some time. Some ideas that you could do to implement the walking classroom is have students keep a listening journal. Not only does it reinforce what they've learned, but it provides an opportunity for further learning. So 2 questions about what else they want to learn about it. Maybe 2 things, what the podcast reminded them of. Maybe 2 questions that they could ask their classmates about the podcast. So encouraging, thoughtful discussions, which leads to better study habits, right? So instead of asking their neighbors, did you like it? They can think of a thoughtful question. What would you have done if you were in X's position? Or what would be different if this would have happened first? Or, just ways that the kids just help them frame what they've learned and make connections and have deeper discussions with classmates. You can also divide the kids up into listening groups, and this lends itself really well to stations. And so, some teachers, they have an aide, or, you might have parent volunteer. You could even ask like a school secretary or the school principal. You could have like celebrity walkers come with you. And this is just a great opportunity to break the kids down into smaller groups so that the teacher can focus on different skill areas. And again, just sort of have the walking classroom be done, like I said, as sort of a rotation. For our middle schools and even some elementary schools that do, full rotations, the walking classroom has been used as a standalone elective class. So instead of, taking the place of a language arts lesson one day and then a science lesson the next day, and then, social studies lesson the next day, the walking classroom becomes its own class and the kids rotate into it. And so they can listen to the entire, catalog of walking classroom lessons. And it's just a great way to just reinforce, get some physical activity. Kids think it's fun. They love it. Oh, look at that. That's my favorite picture of the walking classroom. And I had my friend's daughter who is in art school. I asked her to paint that painting for me. So that's right over there. I think just represents the walking classroom, just joy and strength and potential. And I love it. Anyway, you could do Fun Friday. Usually the walking classroom is where students, the teacher assigns what podcast everybody's going to listen to at the same time, but you could have Fun Friday or Fun Tuesday or Fun Thursday, whatever, and let the kids choose what podcast they want to listen to. And then they can, sorry, my home phone is ringing, it never rings. But then the kids can pick what they want to listen to and then share with their friends what they've learned and maybe encourage their friends to listen to a podcast that they had chosen. Another fun thing that you can do is to have students map their walks. So if you go to Google Maps and you type in the address of wherever you want to start. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago, Blue Island, center of the universe. And so I popped in Paul Revere Primary School. And so here it is. If you then right click and you can then measure distance. And this is, you click it right here and you can then click, 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 and it will allow you to map your walk and it will show you how far distance is. So you can practice map skills. So you can say, start at Paul Revere and then, go east. And then for 0.1 miles, go north and then turn west and then turn south. So it's a really fun thing you can do. If you have 30 kids in a class, you each walk a mile. That's 30 miles. You can turn that into different math activities. So you can say, okay, how long will it take us to walk to Disney World? And how long, maybe you have a walking pen pal school across the country. We can help facilitate those relationships. Maybe you guys can decide to meet, somewhere in the middle of the country. But a lot of different skills can be pulled into, using the maps. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, creating your own podcast. There are a ton of free resources on the internet. It will require minimal instruction on your part. Just tell the kids you can create your own podcast. I promise you they will find a way. But it gives them an opportunity for real research, something that they're interested in, something that they kept in their listening journal that they wanted to learn more about. So then, it gives them, real motivation to find out more about this topic. They're familiar with the walking classroom. They're familiar with the formula of it. They can write their script, they can record it, your high flyers, they can add sound effects and, lots of other things, have different speakers come in. And the kids who are really just sort of able to do the bare minimum, they're still excited about it, right? And so that gives them something to research. They can hear their own voice. These audio devices, they come locked and, there's no uploading and downloading. That's the great part. Sort of the bummer part is that no new content can be added to these. So what you would do with the students' podcast that they created is just add those to the teacher's website so that everybody can listen to them. So grandma and grandpa, the kids down the hall, everybody would have access to the podcast that your students created. So lots and lots and lots of fun there. Nitty gritty. How much does this cost? Okay, so for these audio devices, each preloaded Walk-It audio player, we call it a Walk-It, is $125 per device. And that's a one-time expense. It's not a subscription based. You buy it, you own it. Most of our adopters have been using their same devices for 5 or 6 or 7 years. So they're really, really durable. They require one AAA battery. And so the devices themselves are not rechargeable, but we do have many of our adopters use rechargeable batteries. And so when it ships to you, it comes in this box with the audio device and then with a lanyard that wraps around the kid's neck and then one set of earbuds. So if you're going to be sharing, each child would need, if you have a set of 30, but 90 kids are going to be using it, you would, each kid would need their own earbuds. So you would need 90 earbuds. But we provide, oh, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. We also have a mobile app. So if your school is a one-to-one and you would prefer to have mobile access, that is $3.99 per device per month. I have to say 99% of our adopters really do appreciate the simplicity of the devices. And then they just use the devices that don't need the uploading or the downloading. Esser Funding. There's the first Esser deadline is coming up September 30th. The walking classroom aligns perfectly with the Esser requirements. We're certainly evidence-based enrichment intervention. We are a one-time expense, not a renewable subscription unless you do the app. Absolutely address academic learning loss and then provides social emotional support. So we are very much aligned with the Esser requirements. And we also meet the second highest level of any intervention. So if your resources needed to be research proven, we got you. Teacher's guide that supports for the lesson plans that support the podcast. It's $150 for the print version, or we have a $100 electronic version available. But because you are all so awesome, if you send me your email, if you send me an email, I can then send you an email with a link to, I'm adding my email here, the walking. Okay. If you send me an email, I will then send you an email that has a link to a free electronic teacher's guide. And you could take a look through it and see if, it contains, if it's what you're looking for. If we match up with what you're, hoping to accomplish, that's great. And if not, then that's fine too. But we are a nonprofit program and, half of our staff is former teachers. We provide free training, free professional development, and that goes for anybody as long as you have the program. So we absolutely understand that there's lots of teacher turnover, lots of after-school facilitator turnover. So if you ever have new people that need to take the training, we're happy to send an endless amount of training. Like I said, we are eager to have teachers, be successful with the program. So we can go ahead. And so I don't know that I'll have access to your emails in the chat. So if you could just keep a note of the email separately. I don't know if I'll have access to the chat after the webinar. So just as a heads up. So if you could just send me that email, thank you. Okay. Also, you can apply for donated materials. We are a nonprofit program. Sometimes we get funding, sometimes we don't. And so if you go to the walkingclassroom.org/apply, you'll find that apply button. And it's a short application, just sort of, filling out who you are, where your school is, why you want the walking classroom. And we work so hard to try to get teachers walk-in classroom materials. But as you might imagine, demand for donated materials far exceeds our ability to provide donated materials. Some teachers, our wait list, honestly, right now is about 300 teachers. Some teachers have been on there for 2 years or so. We try as best we can to donate as many materials as we can. It just doesn't always happen. So I encourage you to apply. Who knows, maybe Daddy Warbucks is going to come and just, throw money down, and we'll be able to take care of everybody. But if that's not the case, nonetheless, you can just be on our waiting list if your school did not have the resources for the walk-in classroom. And in the meantime, I encourage you to please try the walk-in classroom for free. So same thing, if you go to the walkingclassroom.org, at the top, you'll see sample educational podcasts. And there's 25, free podcasts that you have and their lesson plans. So you can download those, get a feel for the program. Even if you're not able to get the walk-in classroom, this will give you an opportunity. You can encourage your kids to use it at home. They can go for a walk with their parents or their siblings. And, just to sort of get some exposure to the idea of it. I highly encourage you to, you can at least, encourage them to start it for free. Okay. And then if you have any questions or comments, that's me. That's all I've got for you. Again, there's my email, and that's my favorite illustration ever. Keep clam and walk on. There's a lot going on these days. We are so grateful to you teachers and administrators for all the work that you do. We're eager to help how we can. But that's all I have. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm happy to answer.
Did anybody have any questions for Laura? You can put them in the chat. No. Well, we really appreciate your time today. This has been really exciting. And we thank everybody for joining us and taking another hour out of your busy schedules. We hope that you will take a minute to fill out the feedback survey and give us your thoughts. We have lots of webinars coming along in our series, so please stay tuned and check it out. And we have our Beyond School Hours conference coming in February, so make sure you register. It'll be in Orlando, Florida, February 9th through the 12th. And it's a great time, lots of networking opportunities, professional development opportunities. So we hope that you will join us then. And again, thank you to Laura and Walk-in Classrooms. They're a great partner, and I hope we'll see you in Orlando as well.
Wait, do we have a question?
No, I just got one comment. I was just so excited about hearing more about the walk-in classroom. And one of our schools here in our district is going to be using walk-in classroom, and I can't wait to see it in action and implement it in our after-school program this year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And at any time, if you have any questions or need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're eager to help.
I just wanted to share, I'm with Harmony SEL. It's a free resource. And thinking about, I love the walking classroom. I love what you're doing. I think that's innovative and exciting. And thinking about our free resources with Harmony SEL, we have a protocol for doing a class meeting or for doing buddy up partnership sharing that I actually think would work really well with a walking classroom. So if anyone on here is going to be doing the walking classroom and you want some free resources to help teachers learn how to really maximize what they're doing with the walking classroom, I'm putting my contact information in the chat. I'm Elle Essenmacher, and I'm with Harmony SEL and Inspire Teaching and Learning. This is exciting work. I hope that some of you contact me, and I think we can amplify the benefit that you can get from the walking classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody. It's good to see you. And we hope we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Take care.